Boy bands had been a gravy boat for the music industry, a group of typically young, good-looking, talented guys singing to preteens. They are easily marketable and especially profitable. We've grown up in the eras where boy bands have come in and gone out. The 60s gave us the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds. The 90s and early 2000s gave us an influx of boy bands such as the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Westlife, Boyzone, Take That, Jonas Brothers. In the 2010s, we had One Direction, The Wanted, Cinco, and BTS. Over the years, through talent shows and TV shows, it's become easier than ever to create a boy band. However, none of these bands can compare or match the success and popularity of the OG. You may think One Direction or BTS are the most popular bands of all time, but they have nothing on who many consider to be the first ever boy band, the Beatles.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again...
The Beatles have legendary status in the industry. They've set the records artists are still trying to beat. The Beatles are considered to be the best-selling act of all time. They've sold an estimated 600 million albums worldwide and over 1.6 billion singles. 15 UK number ones, 20 Billboard Hot 100 number ones, 7 Grammys, an Oscar, and 15 Ivor Novello Awards. The Beatles have seen success beyond anyone's imagination. Today on Music Rewind, we're going to be looking at the formation of the most successful and influential band of all time. Our story begins in Liverpool, November 1956. A 16-year-old John Lennon forms a group with several of his friends from the Quarrymen High School. Initially called the Blackjacks, they later renamed themselves the Quarrymen. They were a skiffle group, and for those who don't recognize the genre, skiffle is a form of folk music, typically played with a mixture of manufactured or improvised instruments. It originated in the US and had a revival in the UK during the 1950s by acts such as Lonnie Dungan, referred to as the king of skiffle. For the first 5 or 6 months, members kept coming in and going out, and the first stable lineup of the group included 6 members: John Lennon, Eric Griffith, Pete Shotton, Len Gary, Colin Hanton, and Rod Davis. On July 6, 1957, the Quarrymen played at the St. Peter's Church Rose Queen Garden Fete. Band member Ivan Van Hahn introduced John Lennon to a then 15-year-old Paul McCartney. After talking and quickly becoming friends, Paul joins the band weeks later as a rhythm guitarist. In August, members Pete Shotton and Colin Hanton exit, feeling the band was moving away from the skiffle sound towards rock and felt their instruments were unnecessary. And they were kind of right. By 1958, the music they were performing at gigs consisted of rock songs by Elvis and Little Richard, and their performances relied on harmony singing between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The two began writing songs that were extremely influenced by Buddy Holly. From that point on, the duo became a writing team. In 1958, Paul McCartney invites a friend to come and watch his band, and that friend happened to be George Harrison. George asked to join the band but was initially rejected due to the fact he was only 15. However, after persisting and playing guitar at one of their shows, he was hired as the lead guitarist. By January 1959, John's friends from the school had all left the band, and he attended college at Liverpool College of Art. The band now included Paul McCartney and George Harrison, and they went by the name Johnny and the Moondogs, a rock and roll band, and played whenever they could get a drummer. Lennon brought his friend from art school, Stuart Sutcliffe, into the band as a bassist in January 1960. He also suggested a change of name to Beatles, influenced by Buddy Holly's band The Crickets. They were later renamed Silver Beatles before finally landing on the Beatles. In August 1960, the band became a 5-piece with new drummer Pete Best, and also booked a residency in Hamburg, Germany. Long story short, shit went down. The Beatles breached their contract by performing at the rival club, the Top 10 Club, and they were handed a 1-month termination notice. And the owner also reported George Harrison for being underage, and had lied about his age to German authorities to gain access. He was deported in November, and only a week later, Paul and Pete were arrested and deported for arson, as they apparently set fire to a condom in a concrete corridor. I don't think that's what Kings of Leon meant by sex on fire. John returned to Liverpool in December, and his friend Stuart found love in Germany and became engaged to photographer Astrid Kitscher, who took the first semi-professional shots of the Beatles. Stuart left the group in 1961 to focus on his studies, and in 1962, he unfortunately died at the age of 21 of a brain hemorrhage. Now a four-piece, they were contracted by German orchestra leader Bert Kaempfert. They became Tony Sheridan's backing band on recordings for Polydor Records. And in 1961 comes the release of My Bonnie, credited as Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers. The song reached number 32 on the German singles chart. The Beatles began getting popular in Liverpool thanks to the Mersey Beat movement. Mersey Beat became popular in Liverpool before exploding through the rest of the UK and the US due to youth culture. Mersey Beat is beat music, influenced by rock and roll, folk music, mixed with R&B and pop music. This later expanded into sounds such as folk rock, garage rock, and psychedelic music. The Beatles, however, were getting bored of the music and performing at the same clubs every single night. In November 1961, while performing at the Caravan Club, they meet a very valuable member of the Beatles, Brian Epstein. Brian Epstein was a record store owner and music columnist, and was drawn to the band's sound and style quality. Over the next few months, Epstein followed and rooted for the band before becoming their manager in January 1962. His first job was to get the Beatles out of their contract with Bert Kaempfert's production, eventually getting them a 1-month early release for one more recording session. It was on their return to Germany in April 1962 where they were told about the death of former bandmate Stuart Sutcliffe by his fiancée. Brian Epstein began looking to sign the band to a UK record label. He negotiated an early end to their deal with Polydor Records in exchange for more recordings with Tony Sheridan. Epstein pitched the band to Decca Records, who rejected them, claiming that guitar groups are on their way out. 3 months later, they were signed to EMI's Parlophone by producer George Martin. June 1962. The band have their first recording session at what is now the Abbey Road Studios, but then was called the EMI Recording Studios. George Martin immediately complained about Pete Best's drumming, and he suggested getting a session drummer instead. A session drummer, often referred to as backing or studio musicians, play instruments for acts during recording sessions and live performances, more behind the scenes than having a permanent ensemble role, as opposed to Pete Best. The band were on board for having Pete kicked out of the band if it meant their records would sound better. However, Epstein was having a very difficult time making this choice because Pete brought a lot of star power to the band and was getting a lot of attention from girls, especially during gigs. However, on August 1962, Pete was fired. However, he was allowed to play 2 gigs with the group until his replacement arrived. He skipped the final performance, and I think we can understand why. In mid-August, we welcomed the final member of the Beatles, Ringo Starr. On September 4th, 1962, the band completed a recording session of their song Love Me Do with Ringo Starr. However, George Martin was unhappy with his performance, and for the third recording session brought in the drummer Andy White to finish the recordings, and 3 songs came out of those sessions: Love Me Do, Please Please Me, and P.S. I Love You. Starr's version of Love Me Do was released as the band's official debut single alongside P.S. I Love You on October 5th, 1962. Both songs were written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The song initially hit number 17 on the record retailer chart, which is now known as Music Week, and the official UK singles chart. They made their television debut on ITV Granada Reports, which was then known as People and Places. Knowing George Martin and his dissatisfaction, he requested the band re-record P.S. I Love You at a faster tempo. The session was taped, and at the end, the producer correctly claims, "You've just made your first number 1, and it was their first of 20 Billboard Hot 100 number 1s. Thus began Beatlemania.